There we are. Welcome in, everyone. My name is Carla Berlin. Thank you for tuning in to Around Town TV Live. Minnesota's lifestyle and business experts, we've been bringing you the best kept secrets, businesses, organizations, and people since 2003. We are the Twin Cities' longest airing television community showcase. And I am thrilled tonight to have back a very familiar face about a month ago that we had on. He is the county commissioner with Sherburn County District 1. He is president and owner of AJ Hulse Company, which owns and operates 1885 men's salons in both Wayzata and the shops at Arbor Lakes in Minnesota, for those of you who are watching that are not from Minnesota. And he also has 35 years of business and leadership experience. Please welcome back Andrew Hulse.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. And did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah, Hulse. It's like Pulse, except with an H.
That's what I thought. But, it's been one of those days, so I thought I better make sure we could correct it. You and I have been talking a lot about leadership with your background and all of your you've got a plethora of a background. And before we get into tonight's conversation, which I know a lot of people are eager to learn and hear more about, if you wouldn't mind, for those who maybe missed the first show, sharing a little bit about your history and background.
Sure. So just from a background perspective, I started out, I was my first career, I was a naval flight officer. I flew in the Navy for just under 10 years. In P3 Orions, and then I was also a flight instructor in T-43s. Coming off of active duty, I ended up going to work for Honeywell in the Twin Cities, and I ended up having a number of executive roles in technology and aerospace with Honeywell, and then a couple of other companies as well. And along the line there, I started looking into entrepreneurship, and I was interested in purchasing a company. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that have happened in corporate America, but for me, one of the big issues is that I was doing almost 100% international travel, spending a lot of time away from home, and I wanted to find something that I could just stay at home and concentrate on. I was a little disillusioned, especially with some of the latter companies that I was with in sort of how they viewed leadership and how they treated and viewed people in their organizations. And I felt like we could do it a little bit differently, treat people with respect, do it a little bit better, care for our customers a little bit better, and ended up going into, men's hair salons, which is the logical step from aerospace to men's hair salons. Right. That's what everybody does.
Right.
But we opened it up about 12 years ago, and it's really been good to us and accomplished the goals that I was looking for. So that's what we've done ever since. Then I decided I wasn't busy enough, so I ran for county commissioner and ended up taking that role. I'm in my second term now as county commissioner up in Sherburn County, but I'm enjoying that as well. I feel like that's an opportunity to really have an impact as well. So I'm enjoying that as well.
Well, and you certainly are making a big impact. I know that, and it's near and dear to your heart. I can tell from things you've shared offline with me. And we have a lot of people online, but I'm guessing that's because both of our followers and my following, this really speaks to a lot of people. We've talked about leadership, we've talked about some of the problems of that, but there is a movement, if you will, for lack of a better adjective, but we were talking about people my age. Well, I'm actually quite a bit older than the 58 plus that are choosing to leave the corporate world and are looking to start their own business. Ironically, many of you know, after 25 years, I did the opposite. Being in the media and marketing world, it was becoming very fragmented. We all know digital and AI is the big push, technology and software. Well, to be a small guy like me and partnering with these big companies that have, like the company I'm with now has 3 patents. Well, where am I going to get that kind of millions of dollars as a little guy? So it just made sense for me to take that next leap. But most people are doing the opposite that are 50, not most. There's a huge movement of people 50 plus doing the opposite, leaving the corporate world to start their own businesses. What do you think is the cause or the reasoning behind that? Let's talk about that.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is I think there's a significant portion of them that are not leaving voluntarily. Um, we talked about this a little bit last time. In the 90s, there was a big shift in corporate culture.
Mhm.
And what happened was corporations, and it was primarily led by Jack Welch and a number uh, of his disciples, for lack of a better term, that went throughout various companies. They were sought after for CEO positions in various companies. But what they did is they fundamentally believed that the people in a company were just another asset. So
Mhm.
what became supreme was the stockholders, and then the customers, and then the employees. And it used to be, prior to that, if you went to work for a company and you worked reasonably hard and you did a reasonably good job, you had a reasonable expectation that you would be employed for that company for life. What happened in the 90s when this changed, under this GE philosophy, was a company would miss a quarter. They weren't unprofitable for that quarter. They just didn't quite make the numbers that they said they were going to make. They were a little less profitable than they thought they should be. So they would let people
Right.
go, to make a number. And it broke a social contract, and it created a lot of division within the companies. And it also broke any loyalty that the
Yeah.
employees had. And you see this a lot now with Gen X. And so
Mhm.
what I see happening a lot is you have a number of people that are um, being let go from these companies because once you get to 50 or so, you're
Mhm.
at sort of your peak earning potential,
Mhm.
expensive. And what
Right.
companies are choosing to do is to let these people go, bring in much younger, much less expensive individuals, not really caring about the social contract that they had with these folks,
Right.
and just trying to make a number, make themselves a little bit more profitable at the expense of these senior individuals in these companies. And at 50, 50 to 55, you may not be in a position to retire yet.
Right.
Uh, and you probably aren't. So you've got to find a way to bridge that time that you can get to retirement. And a lot of individuals are looking at entrepreneurship and that
Mhm.
sort of thing in order to try to bridge that gap. So I think a significant portion of that is where that's coming from. The other
Mhm.
piece, for the people that are doing it voluntarily, I think there's a number of individuals that are sort of down my path, which are, they're just seeing what's happening around them, and they would rather choose to leave on their own terms.
Well, and I've seen it so often as well, and like you shared, a lot of people are then trying to bridge the gap by starting, whether it's a consulting business, going into real estate, trying to do a variety of different things, to bridge the gap, to build a business. And it really is, I found, having been an entrepreneur, to get into the corporate world is also hard because most people think the same thing. You're going to leave, or at the moment's notice, where someone like myself, who knew I needed the right partnership and to get into the right fit, I just turned 58. That's not easy when you're applying. And
Mhm.
yes, even applying online, and yes, people say, oh, you look young for your age. I get it, but I also don't look 20, and I know that. I do have that experience. I do have a ton of energy. I'm willing to work hard, but I also understand that with someone like myself, I'm more expensive.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge is, I think you're the exception, rather than the rule. Um,
Yes.
I've had a number of people reach out to me through friends, former colleagues, and those sort of things, and said, ask about going into entrepreneurship. But their story is always the same. I got let go from company X. I
Mhm.
got a fair, compensation package, but I'm applying to these companies, and I'm not even getting any callbacks.
Right.
And to put a term on it, it is in fact ageism.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just
Yeah.
very difficult to prove, and so
Right.
you end up with all of these people that are trying to go out, and they're trying to find a way. They've got to find a way to make a living, and
Right.
and and a lot of even the outplacement firms will point individuals toward the idea of buying a business or starting a business. I mean,
Right.
I share a little bit about, one of the things that people get led into is, do you want to start a business based on what you know,
Right.
or do you want to buy a franchise? And there's a lot of perceptions and misperceptions around the pluses and minuses of those as
Mhm.
well. If we take, for example, my path,
Yes.
um, you go. So I ended up purchasing what was at the time a franchise. So 188 Fine Men Salons, when I purchased in, was a franchise. I joke about the natural extension of aerospace going into hair
Right.
salons, but I had no idea how to run a hair salon. You
Right.
know, that's the advantage of a franchise is they could teach me the nuts and bolts of the business, sort of the day to
Mhm.
day. Now, what I bring to the table is knowing, because I've been a general manager and an executive for so many years. I know HR, I know legal, I know finance, I know all the things around running a business, just don't know the particulars of running hair salons. So the advantage of a franchise is they'll teach you how to run that business. The disadvantage is that you're going to pay for that.
Right.
You're going to pay for that up front in your franchise agreement, but you're also going to end up paying franchise fees. And one
Mhm.
of the challenges in franchising is sometimes those fees are so expensive, it makes it almost impossible for the individual franchisee to be profitable.
Yeah,
It
they're
also,
exorbitant amounts.
yeah, and so you have to be careful on that. And I don't know. I've seen a number of different statistics. I don't know that franchises have any better success rate than just starting a business from scratch. I've
Yeah.
seen some, but I've seen the other too, which says that franchises kind of fall into the same category. Maybe around the edges, there's some statistical improvement, and maybe with a specific franchise that's
Right.
true. But in aggregate, when you take them all together, I don't know that there's a significant improvement over just starting a business on something that versus
Right.
franchise. It depends on what you're looking for.
Well, I was told that this was a while ago, though. McDonald's franchises have one of the lowest failure rates, like less than 25%. But I was also told that that's one of the franchises that you have to have millions of dollars
Yes.
to
I,
get into.
yeah.
So they set you up. And you and I talked a little bit about this both offline, and I may have mentioned this in the last show. Um, transitioning to entrepreneurship as an entrepreneur and a seasoned one, I was brought into my alma mater, Augsburg College, now Augsburg University, to their entrepreneurship class. The professor that would bring me in was well loved, and if you went to every class and did your stuff, you could get an A. You could get a good grade. And so I would ask, it was an evening class, and I would ask the kids or the students, how many of you took this class because it's an easy A? Or how many of you took this because you want to open your own business? Well, naturally, they all raise their hands that they want to open their own business, which a lot of people think they want to do, or transitioning, as we've talked about, a lot of these people want to do. And so then I would say, look around the room. Of the 25 of you, only one, maybe two of you are going to be successful. And now for sure, all of you will get to pick which 12 to 18 hours a day you'll work,
Right.
especially a small business starting out. And of course, the looks in their eyes, like, oh my gosh. And I said, a lot of people will use their life savings, their 401ks in the case of the 50 plus, and cash it out, and they're not successful. And then they're really in deep trouble. Let's talk about, kind of some of that, the advantages, the pitfalls, some of your experiences with this.
I think one of the reasons for that is, so when you purchase a franchise, one of the documents that's required is the franchise disclosure document.
Mhm.
And the franchise disclosure document requires the franchisor to show the franchisees what the expected working capital will be needed for the first 3 months of operation. What happens is a lot of individuals then that are going into this assume that means that after 3 months they're going to be profitable, and
Mhm.
that's generally not the case. There are some business models that can get profitable very early, but most are not. And my anecdotal experience is it takes 3 to 4 years for a company to get to the point where the owner can start to take a paycheck.
Mhm.
So when you think about that time horizon and how much working capital you have to have in order to be successful, because the number one reason that businesses fail is they run out of working capital.
Right.
They simply don't have enough money to continue to fund the operations, to pay their employees, to keep the doors open, to
Absolutely.
get to the point where they've built up their client base, where they've built up their customer base, and where they're able to be profitable. And so
Mhm.
that's one of the biggest pitfalls is just being prepared, not just to have the working capital to get your company to the point where you can start to take a paycheck, but then
Mhm.
also, how are you going to feed yourself for that
Right.
for that 3 years, 3 to 4 years?
Sometimes even 5.
Yeah, to
Mhm.
get to the point, you've got to have a plan in place on, okay, this is my income stream. This is what I'm going to do to support myself while my company while we're building up my company. Then I can start to take a paycheck. And oh, by the way, it's not, you don't instantly turn it on and you're making, whatever you were making before. You have to
Mhm.
ramp that up too.
Right.
So it's very challenging. I saw I saw a number of individuals just really underestimate that what from a working capital standpoint, what it took to get to much profit. And you're right, they would lose their life savings, they would lose their
Mhm.
401k because they had overly optimistic projections, and that's tough. It's tough to see what it does
Mhm.
to people. The
Oh, absolutely.
and the other thing that I think is challenging is there's also a perception, especially people that are coming out of corporate,
Mhm.
of I'm going to buy this franchise, I'm going to have someone else run it, and I'm just going to collect a check.
Right.
It's not going to be any work on my part,
Right.
and and that's also a recipe for disaster,
Mhm.
because nobody will treat your business like you will.
Mhm.
Um, for example, 18A, what they originally told us when I was going through doing my due diligence is they said, well, you'll hire a manager, and that manager will do all the purchasing for your company. Well, once we opened up, my wife and I realized within about a month, nope, we're going to do the purchasing ourselves, because
Right.
because you have to keep track of your pennies and dimes and make sure that what's getting purchased is actually what's needed for the company. There's a lot of nice to haves, and then there's have to haves, and so
Absolutely.
you got to make sure that you're paying attention to that. Now you can do that and be respectful with your employees and treat your employees well, but you absolutely have to keep a tight rein on the finances. You have to know where the finances stand. You have to know what your cash outlays are going to be, and it's more than a full-time job. And while yes, you might build in some flexibility in your schedule, you're still going to be worrying about it late at night. Trust me.
Yeah, I do know that and understand that, having been an entrepreneur most of my life as well. What made you choose this business model or this franchise, coming out of where you were and then to going into, like you said, the hair salons and it's a very high end hair salon at that.
Yeah, it's so there's a path that you can go down where you can hire a consultant.
Mhm.
And there's consultants out there that specialize in helping people that are interested in going into franchises explore different franchises. And they'll, obviously they're like any other business. There's some great ones, there's some terrible ones, but
Mhm.
but generally what they try to do is they'll spend time with the individual, interview them, get to know their interests, get to know what's important to them, what's not important to them, and they have a portfolio of franchises that then they'll present over time to the individual. Um, Now, you have to be a little cautious, because how they make their money is when the individual signs a franchise agreement, they get a finder's fee basically from
Mhm.
the franchisor. So they have a vested interest in them buying a franchise
Like a recruiter
of
that's
something.
placing someone.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. It's like a
Mhm.
recruiter.
Mhm.
So just you just need to be aware of that, right?
Mhm.
They have a financial interest in it. But what I did was I hired one of those, and I sat down with them, and we probably spent 9 months going over various business models, various franchises. I mean, it was everything from, there's some franchises around where you form company boards and you run those. There's there's coffee shops, there's restaurants, there's learning centers, there's all different kinds, and I explored probably a dozen different
Wow.
business models. I'll be honest, hair salons was probably on page 12 of my priority list, but I happened to go out to California and explore this one, and I really liked the business model itself.
Mhm.
I wasn't sure that it would translate to Minnesota,
Mhm.
uh, but there was nothing else like it in Minnesota. There was no so what 188 is, it's a high-end men's hair salon. The stylists themselves are specifically trained in men's haircuts. And why that's important is in Minnesota, for example, there's something like, I think it's either 30 or 60,000 cosmetologists that go
Oh,
through
wow.
cosmetology school.
Okay.
There's 2 or 3,000 barbers. Barbers learn men's haircut. Cosmetologists get very little training in men's haircut in school. So when you think about 60,000 of them versus like 2,000 barbers, most men are going to a hair salon of some kind with stylists that are primarily trained in women's haircuts, and
Mhm.
men's hair is very different than women's hair. And so the reason I like this particular model was it provided training for the stylists on specifically on how to do good men's cuts.
Mhm.
Um, and went out there, investigated, got my haircut there. Frankly, it was the best haircut I ever got in my life. And came back. My wife and I discussed it, and I did some investigating, just a little more due diligence around. And I thought it was a risk because I didn't know if the model would translate, like I said, to Minnesota, but fortunately it did. And we got lucky. We got some really nice locations. Uh,
Yes.
our Maple Grove location ended up in the shops at Arbor Lakes. From an identity standpoint, the shops is a great location. It's a high-end outdoor shopping center. Our brand fits in very, very well there.
It
And then,
does, and you're in good location there too.
yeah, and then in a few years later, we opened up the one in Wayzata, and it's the same idea.
Yeah.
It's a nice location. It fits with the brand. So just a lot of things came together
Mhm.
to bring
How
that.
long have you been each salon been open now?
Yeah, so I think we're going on. I think we're going on next year 12 years for Maple Grove, and that would put us 6 or 7 in Wayzata.
That's great.
So really well established at this point, obviously,
Absolutely.
and so that's sort of been our journey.
And
Um,
did your wife leave her was she working, and if so, did she leave that to help you with this, or
well, so my wife was a neonatal ICU nurse, and
Wow.
so she had retired, and when our second daughter was born, and so her joke is that I bought her a job. Um, so so
I was just thinking that.
well, and so what happened was when we first opened up, I was still in corporate. That was my exit plan. Was
Yeah.
okay. So my revenue stream, I'm still getting paid. I'm still doing a
Mhm.
corporate job. My wife, I helped set up the salons, get them open, but then she would run them for a period of time. As they grew, it became harder and harder for one person to do. Once we got two sites open, once we had around 25 employees, it became overwhelming for her. Fortunately, at that time, I was at the opportunity where I had the opportunity to leave, and so and then just do this full time, and that's when I could start taking a paycheck from it. So we were able to transition it right. Of course, then
Mhm.
right 2 months later, we hit COVID.
Right.
That was not written into my business plan whatsoever,
No.
but we managed to survive that and get through all that, and so it's worked out. It's worked out well for us. But it takes a lot of work. You never when you're running a business, when you're working without a net is what I like to say.
Absolutely. Well, and what I know about you and your background, your leadership clearly is why you've been successful. And in fact, what you had shared with me is, this business is no longer a franchise business, and you were actually consulting with them and helping them be, stay and remain successful for a long time.
Yeah, so you'll read a lot about this, especially in entrepreneurial environments where you'll have someone who's the visionary and you'll have the operations person.
Hmm.
And the visionary is like the Steve Jobs, right? So
Right.
the guy that has the vision, like has all these dreams, all these ideas. He's the idea guy. But they typically make very, very poor operational individuals. They
Yeah.
have trouble putting those ideas and dreams into an operational setting and turning it into a business model that's sustainable. So
Hmm.
you always also have to have an operations guy. That would be Wozniak. So to Wozniak to Steve Jobs as an example.
Hmm.
Well, 1888 was the same way. They had a visionary and they had an operations guy. The operations guy had built up over the course of his career, several reasonably large salon companies. And we had the one guy that had, that was more the visionary, the marketing guy, that sort of thing. Well, they ended up being a falling out between the two. So the operations guy left. Well, you had the visionary trying to be the operations guy, and that's just not a core competency. And
No.
so he basically ran out of cash. And
Yep.
so 188 as a corporate entity went out of business. The owners, there were 25 of us at the time. We banded together, we formed a co-op, and we purchased all the assets out of the bankruptcy. So we purchased the brand, the intellectual property, all of that stuff. And so that's how that continued on. Now the advantage for us is that meant we no longer had to pay franchise fees.
Right.
So there was an immediate profitability boost right there. But that's sort of how all that came to fruition. So there's still some 18.8s across the country.
Hmm.
We're loosely tied basically by the trust
Oh,
agreement that we put together, but we're not affiliated in any way other than that.
oh, that's a great story. For those, we've talked about, the pitfalls, especially me, focused on the, okay, well, 9 out of 10 fail. And, but so when people are being either forced out of corporate or choosing to leave or whatever that reason may be, and they're looking at becoming an entrepreneur or franchising or whatever, it isn't for everyone. Do you have any advice for someone who's in that situation that's faced with, okay, I still have to work another 15 years or whatever it may be, at least 10. And here I'm faced now with, I have to pivot.
Yeah. When I've talked to folks about when people have said, hey, let's go have lunch, let's talk about this. I said, what you need to do is do your basic pros and cons analysis.
Mhm.
I may not be able to get the level of job that I had in the past. But I can probably get a job. It just, I'm going to have to adjust my lifestyle.
Mhm.
What are the pros and cons of that? And then think about it from a business standpoint. What are the pros and cons of owning my own business? We've talked a lot about the cons. We've
Right.
talked about the working capital needs. We've talked a lot about, the late nights, how do I, changing laws. How do I manage through all of that? How do I manage the business environment? How do I manage employee issues and all of those things?
Mhm.
But there are some real advantages too. And I don't want people to think there aren't.
Agree. Yeah.
Uh,
Or I wouldn't have done it for 25 years.
well, that's exactly right.
Mm.
So, so there are advantages. I have the ability to control my own schedule.
Mhm.
I have the ability, even though I might be tied to my phone and be at least accessible at all times, I can travel if I
Mhm.
want to.
Yep.
I can choose when to go into the salons and when not to. I
Right.
can I can control who my vendors are. Uh,
Mhm.
I can control what our value proposition is. You have a lot of you have a control of a lot of things that you don't necessarily have in a corporate environment, or
Mhm.
that you have to get a lot of buy-in to from other people.
Right.
So you can run things the way you want to run it, and that gives a lot of satisfaction, and that gives a
Mhm.
lot of pride. And you know, one of the things I'll say is having been in business for 12 years, and I've interacted with thousands of our customers, and I've genuinely enjoyed that.
Mm.
We do things a little bit differently than a lot of salons, for example, do. If we have a customer that has a negative experience, I don't expect our front desk or our stylist to handle that. I'm going to handle that,
I love that.
and I'm going to call that individual personally, and I'm going to talk to them about what went wrong, but I'm also going to figure out a way to make it right for them.
Mhm.
And I do think it has an impact when I, as the owner, make that call, or show that I'm invested in making sure that we try to correct that experience. You're never going to bet 1,000.
No,
I
no, they don't
love
care.
I
Yeah.
love the Disney model, and you and I have talked
I was
about it.
just gonna ask you, yes.
And that's one of the things that I tell my staff is I want you to think about us being at least the customer portion version of Disney, and think about how they treat their customers. And I'll give a perfect example. When our girls were growing up, we took them to Disney, and if we would go, when we went occasionally, I would try to plan something special for us to do that was a surprise.
Mhm.
And on this particular trip, it was a pontoon ride during the fireworks show at Epcot.
Oh,
Right.
wow. Yep,
Yeah. So fun thing to do. It's something that they do at Disney. Um,
absolutely.
we got out on the pontoon. They take you out. They drive you through the canals about a half hour or so before the fireworks show, and then they go park you into the fireworks. Well, we're just starting out, and my oldest daughter starts to not feel well, and so we have to pull aside. I take her back to the hotel room, but the boat captain takes my wife and my youngest daughter out, and they do the tour and they see the fireworks and all that. They get back to the dock, and the captain says, "Hold on one second," and he goes up to their main building and comes back. And what he had done is we hadn't asked for it, hadn't done anything about it. He had just proactively rebooked us for the next night because he didn't want me and my oldest daughter to miss out on the experience.
See, I love that.
Right. And what an impact that had on me, right? And I've always, I've always thought about that. It was just a very kind gesture. And those are the types of things that we try to do in our organization is, sometimes things are going to happen. Sometimes people are having a bad day, but we're going to try to make it right.
Yes.
And we're going to try to make sure that the experience itself is something above and beyond what they're used to. Going to get it right 100% of the time? Nope. But that's what we're going to strive toward. And so I'm proud of where our company has come with that. And I'm proud of our employees.
Well, it's a big accomplishment, and I, like you, always follow the Disney model customer service wise. In fact, most people who know me know that I'm a huge Disney person. I inherited a timeshare from my folks because they were huge Disney people, and they were entrepreneurs. They loved the customer service. It's what kept us coming back. My downstairs, I'm in my studio in my lower level of my home, but around me is all Disney stuff. And it reminds me of, and the reason I keep it and I surround myself with it is for that. They do go above and beyond. They don't bat 1,000. Things do happen, but when it does, you're going to be taken care of. You don't even have to worry when you have to make that customer service call and you think, oh, I'm going to have to fight with them or be on hold. You're never on hold. Usually what I have a Disney Christmas tree, and every year I go in Disney Springs, I buy a new ornament to put on the tree. And a lot of times, shipping, they usually do an amazing job, but every once in a while, something will be chipped or whatever. I don't even have to worry about it. Email, they don't even make me send the old one back. They're like, oh no, keep it. And in fact, we'll just even credit you, or, it's just, they've been so, and as a consumer, that's why I think so highly of them, because I know I don't have to worry. I know I'm going to take care of me.
I was at a company before I'd started the salons, and we had sort of an inside sales team and the outside sales team. And there was a lot of tension between the two organizations. I took those two teams to a Disney customer service training
Oh, wow.
program. And it was only like a 2 or 3 day program, but it was so well done that it had a significant impact on how those two teams interacted. Um,
Wow.
the team building that took place there. So I've always been impressed with their. This isn't a seminar on selling Disney, but
Right. Yeah. Neither one of us work for them. We both have just
right, right.
experienced the good, the bad, the ugly. And I'm blessed being in a corporate setting. And granted, I've been there 4 weeks. One of the reasons though I went to work for this company is the leadership, the
Mhm.
kindness, the cohesiveness, great products to sell, 3 patents on, AI and technology. And so I know I'm blessed to be doing the opposite. I know that. I count my blessings every morning when I wake up. But for those of you who may be either forced or feel like you want to make that transition, I liked what you said, Andrew. Write down the pros and the cons because the grass isn't always greener on
Yeah,
either side, and nothing is perfect. And there are people like yourself that have that leadership background, and it's not just that age group that's struggling right now. Too, the kids right out of college are as well.
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely true. And and both have two different sets of problems. When you think about
Mhm.
the younger, they're trying to figure out how to get their lives and their career started, and it's a challenge for them to raise capital. So
Mhm.
they really have to start small. They really have to be very selective in the type of business model that they want to try to open, because they're not going to get access to a lot of capital.
Right.
Um, it doesn't mean they can't do it. It just means they have to be very, very thoughtful about how they're going to do it. The other side of that, when you've got the other age group, when you've got these 50 somethings that are struggling, getting let go from corporate jobs and those sort of things, they have responsibilities. They've got families that they have to feed. They've got
Mhm.
kids, usually in college at this point. And it is psychologically, it's a tremendous burden on these individuals. That's one of the things that frustrates me so much about just the nonchalant layoffs
Yeah.
that corporate does, is they don't even take into account how this impacts people's lives.
Right.
You know, and to go through and to sit with people, sit at a lunch or have a coffee with them, and just hear about the struggles and what their concerns are. It's just it's
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 painful.
it's very painful. I, I will say we've also seen success stories, right? I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
there are some. I met a couple of weeks ago a couple that, very similar story, had to leave corporate America, found a franchise that they really liked. Theirs was a shipping company
Mm.
franchise, and relatively lower overhead, but
Mhm.
but have just made, have just really made their lives um, so much better because they were able to get across that line of profitability, and they're able to take care of themselves, take care of the kids, and all those things. I had another discussion, and I think this is indicative as well. So one of the lunches I had, individual, same situation. He'd just been let go from a company. He was looking at a couple of different businesses, and he had one that he was just enthralled with. And we
Mhm.
went through and we were doing the pros and cons on both of these two businesses. One he was enthralled with. It was flashy. It was something that he was personally interested in, um, but it was capital intensive. Um,
Mhm.
it had very long lead times to build up a customer base, very difficult to get to profitability. He had this other business, which was basically turnkey. This woman was just going to sell it to him. Wasn't that much of an outlay. Had an existing customer base. Had existing revenue streams. Had existing profitability. Not nearly as flashy as the other one, but this will put food on the table, right?
Right.
And so, maybe his heart wouldn't be in this one as much. Uh,
Mhm.
so maybe the flashier one's the better choice for him. You have to make
Mhm.
those choices individually, but you have to be realistic in those pros and cons.
Yes, no, and that makes sense. And you know, I we may not have all the answers tonight, but you're hearing some truths. You're hearing some pros and cons, some pitfalls, some advantages, and there are both. I think, my advice, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is to do your due diligence. Meet
Yeah.
with people who have both been successful and maybe even failed. People will ask me, like, what do you attribute your success of your TV show and your media company for so many years? Honestly, I didn't failure wasn't an option because I didn't have anything to fall back on.
Right.
Being a single woman, my little multi-poo that you probably heard in the background, she must have heard somebody outside bark a little bit. She's not gonna. I call her my director of wafography, napping, and treats, and she's very good at that. So, but she makes zero money.
Right.
Yeah. So, and there are people like that for me, and my mindset was I have to be successful. I have to make sure I have clients coming in that are paying and to be that, so I didn't really ever get a complete vacation. And so now I am actually going on a 2-week vacation that from last year, when the hurricanes came through and decimated it, I get to go back and I'm excited. I would not be going on a vacation newly into a new job, but guess what? I'm in sales. I can work remote and I am going to work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I think it's a really good point because the there are advantages to getting into entrepreneurship, but you do have to do your due diligence. You have to talk if you're going into a franchise, you need to talk just not to the franchisees that are successful, that they're going to give you a list of those. You need
Right.
to find the ones that have struggled
Right.
and need to find out why they have struggled. You need to realize if you're going to go into these businesses that you're the chief finance person, you're the chief marketeer, you're the chief HR person, you're the chief legal person. So you better brush up on those, right?
Sometimes the janitor.
You're the janitor, the fix-it guy,
Receptionist, the handyman, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be prepared to be jack of all trades.
Mhm.
And like I said before, the biggest thing I tell people is you're working without a net. So you just have to be prepared that things are going to come up. You can't be people that are the kind of person that want their day laid out. I'm going to do this at 9 a.m., this at 10 a.m., this at 11 a.m., this at 12 a.m., which is me. It is a very difficult transition to being someone who's running a business, because you may have something planned at 10 a.m. and at 9:45 you're going to get a call from your business and something's broken and you got to go figure out how to fix it.
Right.
And so you have to you have to learn flexibility, and you have to learn to be able to problem solve on the fly. And the better you get at that, the easier it becomes to manage your business. So that's another big piece of advice that I like to give folks is
I love that.
be flexible and just be prepared to roll with the punches.
And pivot a lot.
A lot.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Anything else that we haven't covered that you really wanted to make sure we covered tonight or share that you've thought of throughout the show?
Yeah, I don't want to leave people with the idea that because we started out with so many of the negatives.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave people with the idea that it's not worth it, because I honestly believe it is.
I do too. Or we both wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it for 25 years and you still in it. You would have gotten
it. And yes, there are days that you have your frustrations, but the pros by far outweigh the cons.
Agree.
But you have to do your homework. You have to be prepared for the unexpected, COVID, whatever that may be. And but if you do your work, if it's something that you're passionate about, that you really want to do, and you're willing to work through the unknowns, you can do very well, and you can have the lifestyle that you're looking for. You can bridge that gap to your retirement. It's not just a have to do it. It can be something that you can enjoy along the way, and figure out a way to have work-life balance with it. That work-life balance might be working one set of 18 hours and sleeping.
Right. Absolutely, because you are the boss, you are the person in charge, and but that's not a bad thing necessarily either, because then you can take time but you are on. But when you're it isn't, what I did was very, almost opposite, but I can tell you it was one of the hardest things, also one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my life, but hard because my time isn't my own right now, even in
Right.
sales. Especially onboarding. I mean, there was a period here in the last couple weeks where I was booked so solid, I hardly had time to let the dog out, eat lunch, or go to the bathroom. And I'm thinking, my schedule isn't. I have people that are so used to that, like, hey, could you quick come here and pick this up? I'm like, sure, I can leave my house at 5 o'clock. Well, you're in sales. Yep, but I'm not it's not my business anymore. I'm on the clock and yes, I can take calls, but I do need to be at my computer till 5. I have
Yeah.
some emails and things I need to take care of. And that it's fun, it's interesting with family and friends. They're not used to that. They're used to me being the one who will run out in the middle of the day and maybe stay up till midnight if I need to, and you can't always do that. But
Yeah. And they are different lifestyles.
they
For
are.
sure. I think there has been a shift a little bit. Both my daughters are now in corporate jobs. And well, one's in administration and academia, and the other's in a corporate job. But there is a little more understanding, at least in some aspects, on maintaining a work-life balance.
Mhm.
I think that's an improvement. I think one piece of advice I do give to entrepreneurs is yes, the buck stops with you. Yes, you're ultimately accountable for either your success or your failure, but it is okay to also set some boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, Whether it's with your employees and say, hey, this particular day of the week, that's my day off.
Mhm.
Anything, unless it's an emergency, it can wait till Monday, or whatever it is.
I
I
love
think
that.
that's okay as well
I
because
agree.
it is easy to get, just like it's easy to get consumed by a corporate job.
Mhm.
It's easy to get consumed by owning your own business, and you can't do that. You'll burn out just as easily on that side as you can on the corporate side. So you need to
Great advice.
have some of that set aside.
Yeah, yeah, and a piece of advice that was given to me a long time ago, and was actually by my dad. And I just had this conversation with another entrepreneur this morning. Many, many years ago, I was going to go listen to a female, very well known in the Twin Cities, and she was giving a seminar. And this was like 15 years ago, and I think it was like $250. And a friend of mine said, "Come, let's go listen to her because she's going to talk about work-life balance as a CEO and a high level." And my dad, he was always so wise. He goes, "Why are you going to go listen to that person and pay all that money?" And I said, "Because X, Y, and Z." And he, as so brilliantly said to me and full of wisdom, "Carla, did you know that that person is divorced?" And I said, "Oh." And he said, and he explained he knew some backstory because they didn't have work life balance.
Right.
So, yes, now they have the expertise to speak to you, but in business, sometimes there isn't. Like you said, sometimes you'll do the 18-hour versus you're not going to do 8 to 5 every day when you're an entrepreneur,
Right.
but you may get to be able to, you don't have to ask a boss when you want to take time off. You have to be smart to set those boundaries, as you said, so you can control your schedule. But the whole work life balance, I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure put on that for all of us to be with our families, which is important. But I think we beat ourselves up when we can't, when sometimes we are pulled to things. And I also ask people to give themselves grace because we can't have that every single day.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about having to be able to roll with the punches, and you have to be able to improvise, and there are going to be times that things are going to come up and that you have to take care of, and it may not be something that can be taken care of in 5 minutes. It may be something you're going to spend 7 8
Mhm.
hours on, because it's that important. So being able to prioritize is another key aspect to it. But I also think when we talk about work-life balance, my view on work-life balance is what you have to do individually to recharge your batteries.
Yes.
It's not what others' expectations are of what work-life balance is. It's what works for you to get you back in the right headspace to be able to get back at it
Great
the
advice.
next day, right?
Yes.
So I'm always a little careful of the term work-life balance because it shouldn't mean the same thing to everyone. It's
Good point. It gets misconstrued because people do try to put it in, and even I just tried to a little bit ago. You're
yeah, yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah, yeah. So it's like I said, my definition is whatever recharges your batteries so that you're able to move forward. That's what your work life balance is. So if it's going playing video games for a couple hours, fine, go play video games for a couple hours.
Mhm.
If it's spending time with family, then it's spending time with family. But don't let somebody else define for you what that is.
Love it. Great advice. Anything else?
No, I think we've solved all the world's problems.
We have, and we've had a great following tonight, even stronger than the first time you were on a few weeks ago. So clearly, people enjoyed that and came back. Thank you, everybody who's watched across all platforms. I was checking back and forth, and I noticed when I went to check Instagram, it brought it down black here. And so I hope that everyone's able to view that. You know, that's the thing about live streaming. We were talking offline is the technology and software is amazing because we're able to do this and bring this to you from anywhere in the world. But also, there's a lot that can go wrong.
Right.
And invariably it does. And it's frustrating for someone like myself who does like everything a certain way and does ahead of time test the technology. It's like, why did you work at noon and now you don't? And but anyway, I thank everyone who's tuned in and listened. And you know what? I'm going to have Andrew back on again because so many of you are so interested in his knowledge, his wisdom, his expertise, and what he has to share. And as a leader, I thank you.
I'd love to do it. Yeah, I've really enjoyed these last couple of sessions, so I look forward to doing it again.
Great. Well, we'll have to plan that here offline. Before we close, any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their time. If if anybody had one thing I would say is maybe for our next one is if
Yeah.
anybody has any specific topics or anything they would like us to cover, they can contact you
Okay.
or put comments or whatever.
Yes.
Maybe we can pick through some of those and see if there's something that piques a particular set of interests or something along those lines.
I know the kids would love to get some advice for someone who's been in the corporate world because there are kids who are trying to get in and I'm hearing stories of these kids out of college that are, in fact, I know one young lady who is a receptionist at a hair salon or at a eyelash salon who's amazing. I've seen her resume. It's well done, has applied to 100 jobs, just wants entry level marketing.
I think that's a great topic because I don't think the schools right now are preparing people as well for the interpersonal interactions that need to take place
Right.
in the corporate world. I also don't think there's as much emphasis on how to interview.
Agree.
I see a lot of interview mistakes, and they're not intentional mistakes. They're well intentioned, but they're even the question. Sometimes people are asking questions, but they're asking the right question at the wrong time,
Mm-hmm.
which can sometimes cut them short on getting that next interview.
Interesting. Let's
So
talk about interview techniques on the next one too.
yeah, we can talk about interview techniques, and I also think we ought to talk about how you plan your first 90 days in a new job, something like that.
Your first what?
90 days in a new job.
Oh, you know what? Well, I could even use that.
Yep.
And in your, and it was for me in this, I hadn't been in the interview world and interviewing forever. And I used to teach interview techniques when it was in person. Here I
Right.
am on Teams, 3 big interviews. And of course, from the waist up, you're, prepared. And I'm thinking, I have sweatpants on and my dog's on my lap. Like, this is so crazy because I didn't want her to bark. So,
Well, there's a lot of phone interviews, and there are phone interview techniques that people need to think about on how they project into a telephone, as opposed to coming across the phone as tired or low energy. So there's lots of stuff we can talk about.
oh, I can't wait. Okay, well, we'll get this booked.
All right, that sounds
Sooner
good.
than later. Thank you again. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Next Wednesday evening, I'm so excited to have with me our executive director from the Upper Midwest Emmys, both Foundation and the Board of Governors, as we have the Upper Midwest Emmys on Saturday, October 18th. And I have the honor and pleasure of emceeing the actual Silver Circle and Gold Circle honor awards that evening. of those being inducted this year. And I'm so honored to be around all my colleagues in the upper Midwest and to be able to do that. But I'm even more thrilled to have, his name is JJ, John Murray will be on. He's been in the industry for years. And we're going to just talk Emmys and everything tied to that. So please tune in next Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Central Time, right here on Around Town TV Live. We'll see you then. And thank you again, Andrew. We'll see
Thank you
you
very
soon.
much. Thank you.
Okay.